I've always felt homesick for a place that I can't remember. But I know when I die, I feel like I'm going to go back there and be like, oh, here it is.
That's Hospice Nurse Julie McFadden. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Stay tuned to hear how Julie thinks about death and how you can feel less afraid of your own. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you're a regular listener, thank you, and I have a favor to ask. Consider leaving us a review so we can keep bringing you more conversations you love. And if you don't know, here's how to leave a review. On Apple Podcasts, go to the Everyday Better page, scroll down to ratings and reviews, and click the number of stars you want to give us. Then right below that, click Write a Review and add your note to our team. On Spotify, go to our page, click the 3 dots next to the settings wheel, and select Rate Show. We so appreciate your feedback, and as always, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development show where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. So the other day I was talking to my husband about a close friend who suddenly lost a family member. Thinking about death seems to kind of happen this way, right? We mostly avoid it until all of a sudden it slaps us in the face. About a decade ago, I experienced my first loss of a relative, my grandpa at 87 years old. He and my grandma were married for 64 years, and he and I had a really special connection. And when he was in hospice in the last weeks of his life, I can remember going to visit in Ohio. Now, I had never been so close to death. Someone I loved was going to die without question. And he was going to do it the right way. He was older, and he lived a life he was really proud of. His last weeks in hospice were how most of us, I think, would be lucky enough to go. It was beautiful there. It was peaceful. The nurses and staff were incredibly kind and warm. And there was a gorgeous view of Lake Erie that I'd walk out to and look at. When he did eventually pass, it took me time, but I realized this fear I'd held about what my grandfather's final days would look like, who would surround him, and how grief would feel for me were a bit different than I'd imagined. While I was, of course, devastated, as the years went on, I discovered that it was learning more about his life through my grandma, understanding why he followed the career path he did. He was a preacher. And who he really was, a truly kind, thoughtful, and deeply spiritual man that actually made my life richer, and I hope my other family members as well. And I have to say, I have an even stronger connection to him that I truly feel today than I did when he was alive. Now, sitting down to tell you this, I've had the opportunity to reflect, but often death feels like this distant, abstract thing, something that we fear, avoid, or ignore altogether. Most of us move through life as if it's infinite, and in some ways I think we should. But the more I sit with it, the more I find that remembering we're mortal doesn't have to be scary or depressing. In fact, it can actually be enlivening. It's what led me to take a nighttime walk with my husband and our dogs recently, even though I was exhausted, and I never do nighttime walks anymore. I think the underpinning of all of it is I desperately want to live. I want to live a life that I feel proud of, and I think we all do. So what if talking about death actually helped us live better lives? What if we stopped waiting until it was too late to say the things that matter, or just do the thing we keep procrastinating on, or stop being so scared and do it anyway? Today's guest is helping people do exactly that. Julie McFadden, also known as Hospice Nurse Julie, is a former ICU nurse turned hospice nurse, a social media educator, and a best-selling author. The videos she shares on TikTok and on Instagram about death and dying have gone viral for a reason. She speaks about death with honesty, compassion, and even a little bit of humor. Today, she's joining me to explain the biology of how we die, the emotional truths she's learned from years of sitting with patients at the end of their lives, and how contemplating death can actually bring each of us closer to joy and peace and meaning and love every single day. Now, of course, this conversation is going to get heavy at times. It's about death and loss and the grief that comes with those things. And I got choked up a few times throughout it, as you'll hear. But you'll also hear me laugh and smile because Julie has this way of talking about death and what it means for a life to end so beautifully. The way she understands death, and especially what happens after, helped me feel less afraid about all of it. And I hope she'll do the same for you. Here's Julie.
I became a hospice nurse because I was an ICU nurse for many years, I think about 8 years. And in trying to preserve life, at all costs in the ICU and learning how we can't always do that, right? And sometimes when we do, it makes things worse. Really helped me see that I had a passion for learning how to educate about death and dying to families and patients and how to talk about it. And that got me into hospice. And then getting into the whole online Hospice Nurse Julie thing, I knew I had a few things I could rattle off that I think were so interesting about death and dying. And I had a friend whose dad was dying 3 years ago, and I was kind of saying those things to him. And he was like, I cannot believe I've known you for years, and I never knew that you could just talk about this so easily. You should really do something with that. And I didn't think much of it. And then I went to go see my nieces who were tweens. They're teenagers now, but they were on TikTok. And I was kind of making fun of them, but I got on TikTok to kind of spy on them and do dances with them and see what they were up to. And I thought, this is really cool. I'm going to make a few videos about the things I know. And I did. And I think it was the fourth one in, it went viral. And I've sort of just let it do its thing. I really let my gut be the guide and just sort of talk about things I feel passionate about, which is death and dying and education about what that really looks like and how to help people who are, which we all are. And, it feels like it's taken on a mind of a whole life of its own, which has been really cool to see. I feel like I'm almost a bystander of it.
And I actually love that you say it kind of came out of happenstance and not a lot of efforting to say how do I get a viral video? How do I get, a lot of followers? It's just you realized you had this capacity at some point, and then someone else pointed it out to you and said, wait a second, this is helpful. And you went and did it, which is so cool. Talk to me about if you go back, was there a point that you knew you had this capacity to sort of hold conversations around death and dying?
I think, it's always hindsight, right? I wouldn't say when it was happening to me, which I have had a lot of experience in what I would call all death can feel tragic, but at a very young age, I lost many close people to me suddenly, right? Which is much different than hospice. But when it was happening, I wouldn't say I was consciously being I'm going to sit with this and feel uncomfortable and know what it means and grieve. But looking back, I feel like my life has led me up to this point. Ever since I've been a little girl, I've been curious about what happens after we die. What is life all about? I can remember asking my mom existential questions when I was 4 or 5 years old, before I was going to kindergarten, what's this all about? Why are we here? What happens when we die? So I've always had a curiosity about it. And then of course, being an ICU nurse, which it felt very different, that really shaped my idea of death and dying as well.
Well, yeah, I'm curious, in the ICU, you started there, how is death and dying looked at differently than it's looked at in hospice?
Well, it's not looked at. I mean, generally speaking, in healthcare, we are not really taught about death and dying. We're taught about the human body and what to do if things are going wrong and how to treat certain things. And we've come very far, and it's amazing. We live much longer. We know a lot about our bodies and how to help them if something's not right. So there's many wonderful things about it. But we do not, I was just speaking at a conference yesterday. I cannot think in nursing school, I don't think we ever learned about the biology of death. And there is a biology to it. Our bodies are built to die. And people don't know that, even people in healthcare. So I think we are just taught as healthcare workers, and we live in a culture and a medical system that's kind of preserve life at all cost. And that's what we talk about for the most part until way, 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 way down the road, usually when we've already done, I think, damage to people and families by keeping someone alive at all cost. Then we talk about it. then we say, maybe enough is enough and there's not much more we can do.
Right.
But I think we should have had that conversation about 6 months prior to that.
Right. I think you've talked about this patient that helped kind of catalyze this move that you made. Can you tell me about that story?
Yeah, I brought up just one of my patients. There are a few, though, but the one I talked about in my book was a patient who had kind of a typical journey in the ICU, which is like you go into the ICU. I was in a surgical ICU specifically, so they're in for some big surgery for a terminal cancer. It is a terminal, like he didn't have a curable cancer. And the initial, surgery went well, right? Which happens to a lot of patients in the ICU, which is amazing. And then he started having complication after complication after complication. So up and down, up and down, up and down. We couldn't get him out of the ICU. And because he was there for so long, I'd say about 6 months, I grew close to him, close to his family. And I could just see how we were truly doing them a disservice. At first, I didn't. At first, it was like, yes, I want him to get better. I want him to live. I knew what he wanted, which was to live as long as he could. And then as time went on, though, I would just see how we weren't really talking about the fact that this man came in with a incurable cancer. And now he's had complication after complication after complication. His toes were necrotic, which means dead. So even if he were to survive, we would have to cut off his toes eventually. He was unconscious most of the time. He was intubated. He was on multiple machines, keeping his body alive.
Wow.
And every day we would do rounds and we would say to his family, like, well, his creatinine's looking a little better, which just means like his kidneys are functioning a little better. And the family would hang on to that day after day. And I thought, this is not right. We are not being honest. So I remember one day I spoke up. It felt like the first time. I think it was the first time where my heart was racing. And I said, I think I worded it very broadly. I think we need to talk about long-term plans or something like that, very vague. And I remember being scared to say it. And all of a sudden it was like everyone in the room was like, yes, 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 yes. Like I finally said what everyone wanted to say, including the family. And we had a meeting that day talking about really what was happening. And the family turned off the machines that night and he died before the end of my shift.
Wow. And
although that was inspiring in the sense of like, I have a voice, I can advocate for my patients, even if that means they die. Death is not the worst possible outcome is what I learned. But because it was my first time, it still was very, like I got in my car that night after that shift and I immediately started crying because I felt like he died because of me, but it still felt right. So that was like my first time where I spoke up. And then over time, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start speaking up for people because people need to know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of preserve life at all costs feels so natural, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially in any scenario, I think about my grandfather who passed away, and he was in hospice care, but like his decline took a while. He had dementia, and then, and he had diabetes, and there were like multiple things that were sort of happening. But yeah, I mean, we do our best to keep each other alive. And this might be a really philosophical like thought or question, but it's like, is it because we fear our own death? Is it because we fear pain and loss?
Right.
So I wonder about, what makes us do that. And I also so respect that you spoke up because I mean, God, in like a work scenario like my own, it can be hard to speak up. And I'm not speaking up for people who are on the brink of dying or that we're keeping alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of the things. Like, I think we fear death because we don't speak of it and we're taught not to. And our culture doesn't. I always say in the 1800s, people were dying in their home. That's the only place they died. I mean, if they were dying a natural death, because death wasn't a hospital thing. Like, people were dying in their homes. They were having wakes in their homes. The families were cleaning the body. The kids were around. Now, because of Western medicine, again, it's a good thing. We have all these advances in medicine, and people now die in hospitals, And I think we need to start. I just think the more we can truly understand, I really believe this, the more we can really understand our mortality, the better we will live and the more peaceful we will die. Like, we need to understand that we're all going to die and there's a biology to death. And I really think instead of that making us fear death more, it'll help us fear death less.
What is the biology of death? Like, what do we need to know that can help us understand this more and hopefully move toward a more peaceful experience of it?
I'm going to be very general because it does depend on how you die, right? But the first thing I started seeing as a hospice nurse was like how miraculous. And I say miraculous because the first thing I noticed was, wow, we don't have to do much as nurses. People are dying naturally, not suffering, not in pain, because our bodies are literally built to do it. So if you're dying what I'd say natural death, right? So you're dying from something, but you're allowing nature to take its course. The body will naturally start taking cues from the body, right? It'll start making you sleep more. It'll start making you eat less, not craving food, not give you an appetite. It'll start making you not drink as much. You're not going to be as thirsty. Calcium levels usually rise. When calcium levels rise, that puts you to sleep. So people will often say, like, I wish I just would die in my sleep. That is kind of what happens. If you're dying a natural death, the body is literally built to do it. So the first thing you start seeing is sleeping a lot more, eating and drinking a lot less. And the first thing families do is freak out and make people eat and drink and try to get them up and moving. They need to get up and moving. We need to get physical therapy in here. And which I'm not saying that's wrong, but we're going against the biology of death. The body is literally preparing itself. And if you let the body do its thing, the person will just sleep a lot and not eat and drink, sleep a lot and not eat and drink. And that'll continue to happen until the body goes into ketosis, which actually releases endorphins and makes you feel good. So like the drier, meaning the more dehydrated someone is at the end of life, the better they usually feel and the more peaceful they die.
You talk about, too, like some of the things that happen in the natural process of dying, and you mentioned the endorphins earlier. Is that what you would call the surge or rally? Is like feeling really good or, popping up and it feeling like, I mean, I've had this oddly, I mentioned this as we were thinking about this interview, like with pets, where you have a pet who is dying, but then all of a sudden the day before or 2 days before, they are up and they're eating and it feels normal. And it's this weird kind of brain trick where you're like, wait a second, was I wrong this whole time? And now we should like abort mission and like start, just pretend that everything's okay. Like, is that the surge?
The surge is called terminal lucidity. That's like the real name for it. And it is a medical phenomenon. So we don't know why it actually happens. So this idea, is it the ketosis? It could be. We don't really know. Unfortunately, like death is not studied enough, like to chemically study it to know why. All we know is that it does happen. It can be really devastating, right? Like you said, because someone looks so close to death and then boom, suddenly they have a really good day or a really good 2 days or 12 hours, and then they die shortly after. So it's important to know so you can embrace that moment, right? And really be there for it.
Yeah, the other two that you mentioned are the stare and then visioning. Can you talk about both of those too?
So visioning is people who are dying, seeing dead relatives, dead loved ones, dead pets. Sometimes it's like deities or people that, if they're religious, they might see Jesus, angels. And again, we don't know why it happens, but it does happen. I can tell you, I mean, you have to see it for yourself. I wouldn't have believed it either. I feel like a lot of people say, oh, it's lack of oxygen or, oh, it's the medication. What I can tell you as a former ICU nurse, I know what ICU psychosis looks like. I know what delirium looks like. I know what low oxygen, when people have low oxygen, what they look like. This is not it. Visioning is something very specific. People think it's always like on their deathbed. It's not. Usually it happens 3 or 4 weeks before they die. And they're usually really lucid, like walking, talking, alert and oriented. And they're just as surprised as you are that they're seeing their dead grandparents. As a hospice nurse, if my patient tells me they're seeing their dead parents, I clock that. Right? Like this is probably happening in the next few weeks. And it usually does. And I tell the family so they understand, right? Of course, I talk to the patient. Are they comfortable? How does that make them feel? Generally, it's a good thing. They feel comforted. I mean, countless patients of mine have been like, I saw my parents last night. They said they're coming for me. Not yet, though. And I can't wait. And I'm so excited. And I feel so much better now.
What are you learning from there's the biological side and then there's the side that, I think is what challenges most of us when we think about death, which is everything else. The personal side, the relationships, the not knowing what happens next, the not knowing when death is going to happen. I mean, all of these things. And so I'm curious, what have you learned from the patients you've worked with, from people in your life about, the process of death and dying that can sort of help comfort that side of it?
So I truly wrote my book for everyone. So it's not because, and I'll tell you why, because we're all dying. And I think generally speaking, even from someone who's in this work, I'm still human. I have fear and anxiety and sadness and anger and contentment and peace, because the general thing that I've seen from my hospice patients that I think all of us can learn from is that the ones who are willing to address what's truly happening to them, which is they're dying, how they feel about that, the physical symptoms, what they want out of the rest of their life because they're not dead yet, what they want after they do die, the patients who were willing to discuss those things, even if they were saying quote unquote negative things like, I don't want it, I'm angry, I don't think it's happening, I refuse to believe it, even that stuff helps somehow. It somehow helps them and their family have a more peaceful life and a more peaceful death. That is the main thing I saw. And I have taken that into my life. I contemplate the fact that I'm dying most days because there's something about that, because my fear around that, it has lessened a lot, but there's something about that that helps me live today. That's what I've seen in hospice patients. And that's what I think we should all be seeing and doing in our life, because it helps me appreciate the sun on my face, appreciate how my coffee tastes, appreciate the smile from the stranger on the sidewalk, the breeze that I see with the leaves moving. There's something that helps me live in today. And I feel like a lot of us are missing that, how to live today.
You're reminding me of this experience I had last night. I was, I'm going to get emotional. My husband and I have 2 dogs. And so I normally go to bed really much earlier than he does. So he's on night walks and I will not do it. I put a firm foot down.
Yes.
I'm I'll do morning. I won't do night. And last night he said, we came home from a show and we're like, okay, we've got to get the dogs out. And I normally would say, nope, see you later. And I just had this moment where I was like, oh my God, there's only so much longer that we'll be able to walk these dogs together. There's only so much longer that we'll have these dogs. There's only so much longer that we'll be able to walk together. I mean, all of those things came into my mind and I was like, nope, I'm coming. And he was like, oh, you want to come? I was like, yes. And I went, and how small, and, it was a 15-minute walk, but just taking a moment to be like, hold on a second, Leah, you're so worried about getting this perfect amount of sleep that's so important, but how much will that matter when you look back and go, all right, so I slept for 6 hours instead of 7, but I actually got to spend time with people and animals that I love.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, there's nothing wrong. So my book is called Nothing to Fear, right? But there's a caveat in the book where I say it's normal to fear. So it's not even nothing to fear. It's normal. It's normal. And just because we fear it doesn't mean we're doing something wrong. And we have to not fear it. It's no, we just talk about it. Of course we fear it. It's the great unknown. There's something about even saying the truth of the matter, which is, I'm afraid, or I'm sad I'm not going to be able to walk my dogs every day for the rest of my life, right? Yeah. Or, whatever, it's okay. The point is it's okay. And that is what I've seen. All of my experience, anything I ever say is because of what patients have taught me just by watching them. It was not about them being okay with the fact that they were dying. It was about the fact that they were being honest about it.
Coming up, Julie offers questions we can all use to get more comfortable with death and evaluate how we want to live. And we're back with Hospice Nurse Julie. I want to switch a little bit to just your thoughts on like your career and your work. And, you know, I was thinking about this earlier. I'm like, how many people graduate from high school and go, yeah, I'm going to go be a hospice nurse, you know? Like,
I know.
I like, you all are saints, right? It's like for you to make that choice is really powerful. What do you want your career and your work to mean whenever it's over?
That's so great. No, truly, no one's ever asked me that. You know, I did not graduate high school saying I wanted to be a hospice nurse either. You know, I think this career as a nurse, just generally speaking, not even a hospice nurse, kind of found me. I feel really grateful looking back that I was kind of just this young, you know, I got my first degree in psychology, my second degree in nursing. And it was like, because I was young and my friend was doing it and I didn't know what to do. You know, it was like looking back, I'm so grateful for it because I just didn't know what I was doing, right? And then I got into it and I was like, oh, I love this. And the one thing I'm really grateful for is that I wasn't afraid to change. Well, no, I was afraid, just kidding. I was very afraid, but I still did it. I was very afraid to change, but I knew something had to because I wasn't happy in my ICU nursing career, right? So I made a change and then made a change and then made another change. And I feel like because I was afraid, but I still did it because I knew I needed more. I knew I wasn't quite doing what I was supposed to be doing. It has led me to a place where I feel so happy, and not even happy because happy is just a thing. I feel so content and peaceful about where I am in my life as far as career and life work balance, because it's not just about the career for me. And I hope I continue to do that in my life. If I'm in a place where what I'm doing is not feeling good anymore, I hope I choose to go against the fear and do what I need to do to get out of it and make the change. That's what I truly hope for the rest of my life, because it's changed who I am and has made me a better person and more content and less afraid of death, right? Honestly, I'm less afraid of death because I can look back at my life and be like, hell yeah, I really lived.
Do you see other pivots for yourself in your career? Like, I mean, most of us can't foresee what's coming, but if you were like, okay, I want to like get to the end of, if I could paint done, like, you know, paint my career starting and coming to a finish, are there things you haven't done yet?
You know, I really like to wear my career as like a loose garment. So I don't know if it's good or bad. And this probably is, I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't necessarily have tons of goals, like tons of things to check off. I sort of try to stay in the day, being of service to others best I can. And it has really unfolded my life in a beautiful, beautiful way. So I feel like I want to continue to do that and see how things unfold. I truly don't have anything that I am working for. There are things I want to do, like actions I want to take, you know, different classes maybe I wanted to develop, but it's not this like driving force in my life. The driving force in my life is to be connected to a higher power that helps me be content in the moment that I'm in and love myself enough so I can love others the way they deserve to be loved. That is like the driving force. And everything else is like icing on the cake and doesn't fully matter to me.
Wow. How have these experiences you've had with people in hospice, and maybe this was before this point, but how have they shaped how you think about, you know, whether it be like a higher power or, you know, a greater meaning in life, whatever that is, how have they shaped that?
Yeah, I mean, watching death day in and day out, or people getting close to death has helped me see that we're all one. Like that's like my core belief anyway, and life is about connection and being present in the moment in this constant love. And that is all I see in hospice for the most part. Like truly, wow. It's like all I see is like love in action and families caring for each other and connecting with people and helping them hopefully feel a little bit relieved after I leave because I'm not afraid to talk about death and I'm not afraid to go there with them. And hospice is a place, there is something about death that makes people more vulnerable in a good way. And I think because we were not talking about this, but just so you know, because I think it's amazing, watching someone take their last breath. I think because it's not my mom, right? It's not my loved one. I'm like the observer of it, right? So I'm not in the grief. But watching someone take their last breath is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Because there's something about it where you're watching other people who love them so much, and it's, and they're so sad and everyone's grieving because they love them so much. There's something about the feeling of the room. It's like time stands still. It's like you could just feel the love. And although it's sad too, I'm not saying it's not sad. It's sad, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's changed my life. Watching people take their last breath has changed my life.
What about it? Is it just that feeling of knowing when you're in the room? Yeah.
Not to get it's hard because it's hard to articulate, right? Without sounding like completely, because I don't understand it completely either.
Right.
Right. But I've watched babies being born as well. Not many, but enough to have this same feeling of whoa, now the baby is here and where'd you come from, baby? It's crying, everyone's crying. It's like that. It's like that same feeling I feel when you see a birth. I feel that same feeling when I see someone take their last breath. And it's actually not different at all. It feels the same. Of course, people are crying because someone's leaving, but it feels the same. It feels like they're going to this place that I once knew before I was born, and they're going back there, Wow. And I almost feel I could cry. I could cry thinking about it. Because to me, it's like, I've always felt homesick for a place that I can't remember, but I know when I die, I feel like I'm going to go back there and be like, oh, here it is. And when I watch someone take their last breath, I feel like I can feel it. I can feel it just a little bit. And I feel the same when I watch a birth. It's like they're coming from that place.
That is so beautiful. I could cry thinking about it. And I'm like, wow, to hear you say something like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's deep. If we go back to the general public as we're getting toward how we get better at this, I'm so curious. I mean, you've found this propensity for this thing that maybe many of us feel today we don't have. And who knows, it could just be a limit in our minds that isn't real if we were to explore it. But I'm curious what some of the bravest things you've had to do are in the context of your work.
Ooh. I think one of the bravest things I've had to do in my work is put me first. It's really hard to do as a woman, as a nurse. Say no to people. I will get to patients and things, but that is one of the bravest things, is saying no to an administration or someone who says, if you say no, you're not caring for the patients that you love. To say no and put yourself first means you're not a team player. I have been that nurse because I refuse to say that I don't matter, and how I feel and how I work and what I need matters. And I think so many nurses are taught not to think that, and taught that we're selfish if we don't say yes to all the things that need to be done. So one of the bravest things I've learned to do is to say no and to be the bad guy. It doesn't feel good because you don't get celebrated. But the more I've learned to do that, the more it sets other people on fire to do it. And it changes the culture at least in your unit. People will eventually start looking up to you and doing what you do because they start seeing that it's possible.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious in the context also, well, first of all, yes, that is huge. I think in the context of anyone working, we all have our own version of what you're describing around the feeling of, if I say no, I'm not a team player. If I say no, I won't get the respect I want. Or if I say no, I won't get the promotion that I want. And, or the appreciation. I mean, it's all of it, right? It all feels like it comes at a cost when you set a boundary. And I think the conversation of boundaries is also pretty new in the context of work. And especially to hear women talking about boundaries is pretty new, in the last decade in the context of work. I don't remember when I started work hearing anything about, the ability to set boundaries and to say no. It was no, you push as hard as you can and you push yourself to the edge because then you'll get all these things. And as we've talked about, those things feel like they matter so much. And I think at a baseline, many of them do. But in reality, the things we're fighting for are oftentimes things that won't give us any long-term satisfaction.
Right. And it took me like 16 years to get there, right? It's not like as a new nurse, I'm like, no. And not that I could have been, but it took me a long time to finally start being like, wait a minute, no one's going to look out for me here. Mm-hmm. And all I'm doing is hurting myself and in turn hurting others because I wasn't a good nurse. I had compassion fatigue. I wasn't as loving or as caring. You can't hurry up and care. Like healthcare wants you to hurry up and care. I haven't been able to do that. But yeah, it did take me a long time to learn that.
What about in the context of a patient or patients? What's the bravest thing you've had to do or you've chosen to do?
I think sitting with someone who's truly suffering. So that's most of my videos are, I love hospice. I love my job. And that is true. And the days that I still love my job, but there are days that really affect me, meaning like I go home and I lay in bed for possibly 2 days and watch The Office and like eat Jersey Mike's
favorite show
and like close the blinds and like I have nothing to give anybody. And it's because I have stayed with someone who was suffering, in hospice, you're not in a hospital setting, you're in the home. So you walk in, someone is truly suffering because of pain or constant nausea and vomiting, agitation, shortness of breath. They feel like they can't breathe, right? And most of the time the home is set up and we have things there and we can quickly make it better. But sometimes you can't. And you still have to wait to get the oxygen. You have to wait to order the medications and get the medications. And you can do everything perfectly and expedite it. It's still going to take an hour, probably 2. So for those hour, probably 2, maybe 3, you are with a person who is truly suffering. I've been with people begging me to kill them, begging God to kill them. And to sit there and do your best to help them with what you don't have. You don't have anything really except for your time and space and little things you can do that are non-pharmaceutical, but it's hard. And I don't want to turn me into a victim, but that is a brave thing to do. It's a brave thing for them to sit there and do. And it can really take it out on you. Those are the days that like it really, really takes me out. Like I do the best I can while I'm there. And then when I leave is when I kind of fall apart. But that feels brave.
I know you talk a lot. I'm sure you get a lot of hospice nurses reaching out to you, but I'm curious what you would say, either from a place of advice or support to other hospice nurses who are out there. Like, what do you say to them at a larger scale?
Other hospice nurses and nurses in general, my advice is always that you need to take care of yourself first. I know it's like really easy to say that. It's like, yeah. But I really mean that. Like the only reason why I can love hospice nursing is because 1, I'm a per diem nurse. And this is long before I was Hospice Nurse Julie. I was a per diem nurse because I could make my own schedule. I could work as much as I want or not work as much as I want. I didn't have to be a total cog in the wheel of a medical system that doesn't care about me, which is what we're working with. So you still have to be but you feel a little separation there where you can say no. Like, no, I can't work overtime. Like, because I can't. Like, per diem nurses have a lot more ability to say no to an administration that doesn't care about them. Now, many people will say, I need insurance. I need to get paid time off. Not necessarily. I would say try it before you say things like that because you usually get paid a lot more as a per diem nurse and you can pay for your own insurance. It's not as expensive as you think and you can plan for your future. It's not as hard as you think. I think a lot of people don't do it because they think they can't. And I can tell you as a per diem nurse, I've made far more money now than I ever did as a full-time nurse and I'm much, much happier. So I think if you're a hospice nurse out there or any kind of nurse and you're feeling jaded, please don't be afraid to make nursing work for you. Nurses are needed everywhere, and there are so many things you can do to still be a nurse, because I'm sure you got into it because you love it. And you start not loving it because you're working in a medical system that doesn't care about you generally, or the person or the patient. which is a whole like hot topic. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but, so take care of yourself. Don't be afraid to do the scary thing. Move around if you need to. Take time off if you need to. I know it all feels scary, but you can do it. You can do it.
I love that. Yeah. I want to make sure that you have the floor to talk to people who are listening to you and going, gosh, I know so much of this. I resonate with so much of this. Like, what does she have to say about the work we're doing? Because I know there are incredible days and I'm sure there are incredibly hard days.
Yes.
And so it's, kind of holding all of that. So then in that vein, you started this TikTok and it's blown up, as well as your Instagram, and you have a book, and, you have a real presence, and whether you meant to or not, you're impacting the way that people think about death in a really positive way, which I think is so powerful, and offering support. What can we all do to get better about talking about this? Can get better at talking about death before it happens, so that we can create more comfort with each other and more support? Like, if you're like, ooh, I could wave a magic wand and people would be doing this, like, what is that?
So on a general, I'll give like specific things to talk about, but in a general way, just talking about this. If you're listening to this podcast and you're hearing us speak to each other, go home to your family and friends who are your closest with and say, I just listened to a podcast about a hospice nurse talking about how we need to talk about death, right? Like, death and dying, dead, those are not dirty words. We can just say them. Let's talk about, and the reason why they feel dirty and bad and scary is because we don't. So let's just start changing the culture. The way we change the culture is by just doing it. There are so many things that people are doing. There's like death cafes, there's death over dinner, where people actually talk about, if this happened to me or X, Y, and Z happened to me, I wouldn't want to be on machines, or there's no way I'd want to be on feeding tubes, or I wouldn't want chest compressions if my heart stopped, or I would. Just getting that dialogue going can help even a little bit. There are workbooks out there. I am developing one where there's like specific questions you can ask yourself. Of course, I want you to do advanced directives and talk to an estate planner, and it's all in the book, right?
Sure.
Like step by step what you should do. I think it's a little overwhelming if you haven't done anything yet. So generally, all of us, everyone listening and not listening, or whoever, if you're passing the word around, it's never too soon to start talking about death. And I have found, as a just turned 42-year-old who's otherwise healthy, that the more I have contemplated my own death, the better I live. The better I live. And I mean that with all sincerity. I live better now because I know that I will die.
I so appreciate what you're doing. I can remember points when I wasn't able to really talk about death. And I guess, what I'll say is, it feels really uncomfortable till you do it. And so it's sort of like, are you willing to sacrifice a couple seconds of discomfort for the experience that you just described?
Right.
And when you think about it that way, it's like the more you do it, the more comfortable it gets. I mean, earlier when you talked about work, being the catalyst for the change that someone else makes in their own life by setting a boundary, like that's a huge role to play, is to be the person who's like, I brought this up. It was awkward. Everybody got weird. But guess what? Somebody went to bed that night and was like, maybe I could talk about this with someone else, and maybe they won't do it right away, but you just never know the impact that you have on people. So, I always think about that, like little bit of discomfort for something really powerful on the other side.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. And, if your family has been emotionally immature and dysfunctional for your whole life, they're not going to just suddenly become not because you're talking about death and dying, right? So maybe you pick people who are a little safer at first, right? Or whoever might be a little more receptive. As long as we're all trying, I think you'll see there's a big difference. And the one thing I like to say is the families that I have seen who were willing to educate themselves about what death and dying is going to look like, and are willing to talk about and accept the fact that their loved one is dying and the patient who is dying, they turned a really scary thing into somewhat of a sacred thing. It's still sad, but they didn't have this like traumatic, dramatic ending to their loved one's life because they were willing to understand what was going to be happening prior to it happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a really, like, dare I say, beautiful ending.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements for me, Julie. The first is, better humans are.
Better humans are connected to each other.
Better work is.
Better work is heart-centered.
And a better world has.
A better world has honest, loving, connected people.
Love that. Thank you so much. This was such an amazing conversation.
Oh, thank you.
That was Julie McFadden, hospice nurse and author of Nothing to Fear, Demystifying Death to Live More Fully. If you like this episode, you'll also love my conversation with hospice nurse and best-selling author Hadley Vlahos. You can find a link to that in the show notes for this episode. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. Tim Boland mixed our show. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief and vice president of content development at LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.